Hello everyone, and welcome to yet another module of the 6-week Affiliate Mastery Challenge. So today we're going to talk about split testing, the basics, concepts, and execution. So what it is and why we even do it, the processes involved, the various variables we test, and the mathematics of that. And then in later modules we're going to talk about the complexities and the basics of tracking, which is the thing which basically allows us to split test in a very automated fashion. And then we're going to talk about setting up a server, DNS, website tracker, and so on. But those will be in later modules, which I will split up rather than having them all in one video. So, what is split testing? To put simply, it is the act of testing for the effect of a single variable on some valuable metric from our campaigns. At least that is the description I'll give it within, the affiliate marketing industry relative to what you're doing. So these important metrics which we may be looking to actually measure could be something like click-through rate, conversion rate, or customer lifetime value. Why do we even do it? Well, we are performance marketers, right? So we like data. At least I like data. Hopefully you like getting data. If you don't, eventually, trust me, at some point you will start loving having data and actually working with it. And of course, we want to make more money. That is why you're all doing this course and getting into affiliate marketing, right? Because you actually want to make money. Now, split testing, the goal of split testing is to improve something like a conversion rate, a click-through rate, whatever, with the goal of essentially making more money. So obviously, you should be very interested in split testing and how to actually do it. Now, the other thing is that improvement of conversion rate variables is compounding. So if you have some conversion rate at the traffic source end, like an impression to a click-through rate, which is it's a conversion rate of some sort, the click-through rate on a lander and the conversion rate on an offer, those conversion rates compound together where small increases in lots of different variables that affect those can overall give you a big change at the end, which then directly impacts how much money you make. Now, what might we actually test when we actually do split testing? The first place to start is the ads. So the banners themselves. We might split test the individual banners, the types of ads that we're actually using, whether they're static or animated, their specific sizes and resolutions, the actual angles and the ad copy that we use in these actual banners. And in fact, angle's kind of a very important term in the marketing industry, and it's something that we'll talk about a bit later, but angle can kind of be an entire campaign-wide executive variable rather than just the angle in a specific banner. We might then even test more granular things like the compositions of ads, the colors, the layouts, animated versus static, all these little things. And what I'll do is I'll include a cheat sheet with some information or a table of little things that you can split test with respect to your banners. We might also split test targeting, so things like geography, that's always a major split test to do, device type, placements, carriers and ISPs, and even our bids, so the actual levels of our bids and our bidding modes like cost per click, CPM, and the way we actually bid. And that's something we'll talk about a bit later in the course as well, actual bidding strategies, because there are various ways to actually approach things here, and it's not so simple as just placing a bid, seeing what works, and just optimizing banners. The bids themselves are important. Remember, with mobile DSPs at least, you're in a large real-time bidding system, and you have these auction theories and models like VCG and GSP, so hopefully by now you'll have reasonable awareness of the fact that the bid modes and the actual bid amounts can have a significant impact on the performance of your banners and your campaigns. Now, we might also split test landing pages. Generally, you want to split test completely different designs from the beginning. That is, if there's one thing you should know about split testing, is that you should always try and do the most major changes first to test the effect of those. So with landing pages, you might do completely different styles. You might change the headlines, the ad copies, the angle, this term which pops up all the time, the images you use, the colors, the compositions, and additions of various little elements or modules or components to your page, like countdown timers and inclusions of scarcity, pop-ups, and so on. And then downstream from that, you might split test the offer. So the same offer, but from different networks, where you're essentially split testing the network, or different offers that fulfill the same purpose. So if you're doing some sort of advertising where you're talking about like a security app which offers some sort of benefits to the user, then there might be 3 or 4 security apps which actually fulfill that purpose, and you can actually split test all of those as well. You can split test the offer conversion model. So this is a very obvious choice in my opinion. If you have an SOI and a DOI sort of version of an offer available where one pays $1.50, one pays $2.40, you can split test those, and that is something I would definitely advise. You could also split test the offer landing pages if multiple ones are provided. These are all kind of within the split testing of the offer in a sense. Now, earlier I mentioned that conversion rates or the impact of these variables can be compounding. So if you line up the various event conversion rates involved from start to finish, then you can kind of simplify and say that the ad CTR times the lander CTR times the offer conversion rate kind of gives your overall basic conversion rate from start to finish. Now, if you had a 15% increase in your ad CTR, your lander CTR, and your offer conversion rate, then those conversion rate increases, they're compounding. So 1.15 times 1.15 times 1.15, that actually gives you a 52% increase in overall conversion rate, which is actually a big increase. There really is quite a massive increase in terms of the impact that can have on your revenue. So you can imagine breaking even and then optimizing your ad to be 15% better, optimizing your lander to be 15% better, optimizing the offer to be 15% better. And now you go from breaking even to making 50% ROI. That is awesome. Now imagine if you were split testing lots of things. So for example, you were testing the ads, their compositions, their colors, their sizes, carrier targeting, landing pages, the call to actions they use, ad copy, headline, images, all of these things. 3 networks who have the same offer, and 3 different landing pages that those offers actually provide. Now, after all that, you essentially have 10 variables that you are testing, which influence the conversion rate at some point. Now, if each of those gave you a measly 4% increase in actual conversion rate, then the overall impact would be 1.04 to the power of 10, which is a 48% improvement from all of those little things compounded together. Now, this kind of assumes that there'll be no positive or negative interactions between these elements that they're testing. There inevitably will be, but when we have good tracking data, we can kind of see these and see how the various combinations actually perform. So this isn't really a huge worry. Now, in terms of the theory behind split testing, what we're essentially doing is hypothesizing that some element or some variable, whether it's a call to action, a headline, a color, has some influence on our conversion rate or on some conversion rate, and thus an impact on a valuable metric. Now, to test that, what we do is we distribute traffic evenly between these variations and we collect data. Now, because we also track a lot of variables at the traffic source via our targeting and the data provided there, so things like the geographies, the devices, user characteristics, and so on, as well as things that the tracking system automatically tracks as well, we can kind of effectively split test along a lot of parameters across those variables. So for example, if you split test 2 landing pages and you send iOS traffic to both of those landers, your traffic source and your tracking system are both actively tracking and giving you data on the specific devices, the ISPs, the models, whether they're Wi-Fi or carrier, whether they came from apps or sites. All of these things are kind of being tracked at the same time as well. So your split test kind of evolves into a simple split test with very granular segmentation within those split tests. So we could actually drill down and see, how those 2 landers are performing for iOS only. We could look at it for iPads only, iPhones only, iPods only. We could look at how the different iOS versions are interacting with each of those landers. So everything can get very granular, and our ability to find profitable segments can really is, really at a really high level compared to what it was many, many years ago because of all of this data that we can track. Now, because of all of this complexity, it's very important that we always conduct fair tests. In fact, this is just an integral tenet of split testing theory. Now, to give fair tests, it's ideal if a programmatic system, so a machine, a robot, automatically distributes traffic between the variations that you're testing. Now, for this, we generally use a tracking system to rotate landing pages and offers and funnels and various things. At the traffic source end, typically when we upload lots of banners, it's on the responsibility is on the traffic source to actually split traffic amongst those banners evenly. And this brings me to my next point, the test subjects, so the users who are actually clicking. It's kind of assumed that the audience clicking on your banners is uniform and homogeneous with no bias between banners. So if you had 10 banners being split tested, you would need a certain number of impressions to each of them to kind of make sure that this audience between them is relatively uniform. If you have 17 impressions on one and 31 on another, it's not big enough to give you a uniform audience. And on that note, you need to make sure your traffic source is actually giving uniform distribution. This can be very problematic on platforms like Facebook, where the distribution you get is actually weighted and influenced by the performance of your ads, especially the initial performance, and that kind of makes testing hard, which means for these kinds of systems you have to come up with a testing approach that keeps that in mind. So at the traffic source level, or at any level, in order to keep things uniform, don't make separate campaigns for each individual landing page. Again, use a programmatic system that actually split tests things automatically. I guess the core concept there to understand is that you should only vary the one thing that you are actually wanting to test, and in all scenarios or all cases, as well as you can, keep everything else unchanged. Now, most often we split test the highest level things first, so executive variables, as I kind of call them. So these are things like the offer and rotating them on the back end in your tracking system, the angles that you're using. Angles is kind of a nebulous term, which for many people takes a while to actually understand, but your angle is kind of like a full flow from start to finish in terms of the way you market to people. And this is something that we'll go over in depth in later modules, but the angles are something that you would split test. Usually you would actually make separate campaigns in your tracking system and your traffic source for different angles to kind of completely split them up for various reasons. But sometimes you might have a campaign where you're split testing the angle within that campaign, and it really depends on you and your situation and the approach that you like. Landing pages, definitely something to split test and something which you will do with your tracking system directly. And the adverts. So again, you would upload these to your traffic source and the onus is on them to give uniform distribution, although the responsibility is on you to understand whether that even happens. And ideally, you would upload banners within the same campaign or group or ad group with the same targeting, the same traffic distribution, the same bids, the same start time, and so on. So a caveat there, for example, might be uploading ads to a campaign with it automatically starting, where the ad start times are based on when the ad gets approved, which might span, a 6-hour period, for example. So stuff like that is something to be mindful of when it comes to giving unbiased testing. Now, there's something called the click flow, or at least that's what I call it, when you're setting up campaigns. And this is the way a user flows through your system and the various things they interact with on the way, essentially the path they take. The click flow is something where, in my opinion, you should always have control over it as much as possible. Now, here's a diagram showing you the incorrect way to actually set up traffic when you were split testing angle, for example, and landing page. So I'll just let you absorb that for the moment. So, pop quiz. What is wrong about that actual click flow? You were testing 2 different angles, 2 different landing pages, but it was not the right way to do it at all. First of all, there's too much there's too much work in setting that up, right? You had to set up one campaign for angle 1 and landing page 1, one campaign for angle 1, landing page 2, and so on and so on. So you had to set up 4 campaigns to do that, and that's a waste of time, and your time is valuable, so don't do that. The next thing, and kind of the more important thing, the less pragmatic thing, is that you have unnecessary variables. So we were making 2 campaigns that both had angle 1, so they had the exact same ads. Why on earth would we run 2 campaigns with the exact same ads, the exact same settings, just to send it to 2 different landing pages? That is not a variable that we want to throw in there because it's completely unnecessary. We then have different URLs for every single combination of variables. The URL is now, kind of a variable. It just means that we're dealing with another campaign in our tracking system as well. And then, because of the way we've set this up, the ad delivery for each individual campaign potentially might vary. So we've just introduced far too much variation into the system, which we don't need. Now, when you replicate campaigns, one thing I wanted to mention is that you unnecessarily risk something called confounding variables having a greater impact on your results. So when we replicate that angle 1 campaign to make another angle 1 campaign, which is then going off to landing page 2, you might think that everything is equal across those campaigns, but that might not be the case. So confounding variable is something that affects your results that you kind of didn't initially think of. Now, the best example I can give here in this scenario is when you replicated those campaigns, they got approved at different times, and one started at 2 p.m. local time, the other started at 5 p.m. That would be a confounding variable that you might not even think of because you look at it the next day and you just think, oh yeah, they've all started. But the actual data that you have over that 24 hours is now quite potentially skewed because of that. But anyway, we will talk about these in a later module. Now, here is a far more efficient and correct way of actually coordinating and guiding the clicks and the users through this actual split testing process. So here you can see you have angle 1, 2, and 3, all at the traffic source with manual splitting. So these are separate campaigns. They might have 5 banners each. Now, all of these are sending traffic to our tracking system, to one campaign, potentially 3 campaigns, but in this case, definitely 1. And then that tracking system is automatically rotating traffic between 3 different landers. From those landers, when people click through, they get sent back to our tracking system to a single URL, and then that tracking system automatically rotates between 2 different offers. So this is a much better approach because firstly, we're not splitting at the traffic source needlessly. Secondly, a programmatic robotic system is doing the actual rotation for us, and this is far more unbiased. Robots and machines are generally going to be much more unbiased and reliable than humans when it comes to this sort of thing. So to finish off by giving you some of the practical summaries of this module, firstly, test the highest impact variables first, traffic source excluded, so different mobile DSPs and things, just ignore that for now. Test things like the offers, the landing pages, the ad creatives are always in there, and the angles. Compartmentalize your targeting at the traffic source where applicable and sensible. So you could put everything in one came, and theoretically this might be a more sound test, but consider that when you are split testing by country, for example, and connectivity like Wi-Fi versus carrier, the audiences may be very different, or their behavior may be so different that the audience changing is not actually an issue. It actually helps you create 2 separate, more uniform audiences than if you had things together, and it's generally just going to make your actual analysis and your data tracking that little bit easier, and it will save you time. So split testing, why do we do it? Because it helps us learn how to lose less money, learn how to make more money. It helps us uncover profitable segments that we could not find without split testing and gathering data, and it lets us discover what works. Not just what works for our specific campaign, but in the long run, what works on a specific traffic source, what works for a specific demographic, what works for carrier-targeted ads in a certain vertical on a certain traffic source. These are the kind of things that we learn over time when we actually split test. So there's a saying in this industry, always be split testing, ABST. And this is something that most successful affiliate marketers abide by. They always split test things to see what works. Now, you should always continue split testing as well to get the most out of campaigns until you get to that point where your split testing is kind of bringing diminishing returns and only marginal gains, at which point you need to make the decision that it's impractical to keep varying things and keep testing things, because I'm kind of at the moment the top of my game in terms of what's actually working here, at which point it's okay to move on and spend your time where it actually brings you more bank. Now, one thing I did want to mention to finish off is that when you are doing the split testing and you're gathering this data and you're making decisions on, say, A versus B versus C, which banner is better, you should make sure that the data you're using to make those comparisons and those decisions gives you, A is better than B, gives you a decision which is statistically significant and sound. And this is something which many affiliate marketers don't actually employ very well in terms like statistical significance calculations and approaches. And it's kind of a complex topic which can be quite hard to actually grasp. But we're going to teach that in a later module, and I'm confident that you guys will be able to get a handle on things after we actually go through them. Right, that's all for today's module. I will see you in the next one.